The courtroom was buzzing with the usual noise of shuffling papers, murmurs from the audience, and the quiet tension that always seemed to fill the air when justice was about to be decided. It was a mid-sized city court, the kind where cases ranged from small civil disputes to more complicated matters, and it had a reputation for moving slowly. Today it was unusually lively because the case was already attracting attention, not for the dispute itself, which was minor, but because of the person standing before the judge. Alex, a teenager no older than 17, adjusted his suit nervously. His tie was slightly crooked and his hair fell just a little over his forehead, but he carried himself with a calmness that surprised even him at times. He had been preparing for this day for weeks, yet standing here, in front of the stern-faced judge and a room full of people, made his heart beat faster than he expected. He clutched his folder with notes and legal references, though he knew most of what was in there by heart. The judge, a man in his late 50s, had seen thousands of cases. He had a sharp tongue and an impatient streak, especially when it came to people he considered inexperienced or naive. He had a habit of teasing those who seemed unprepared. And today, seeing a teenager in front of him, he could not resist. "So, young man," the judge began, his voice heavy with a mix of amusement and skepticism, "you're telling me that you are representing yourself in this case? At your age?" His eyebrows shot up and a small smirk appeared on his lips. "Do you even know what you're doing? Or are you just here to play dress-up in a suit that doesn't fit?" The courtroom chuckled quietly at the remark, some out of nervousness, others out of curiosity. Alex felt a faint flush on his cheeks, but he kept his composure. He had expected this reaction. Many people underestimated him just because of his age, and that was part of why he was here. Today was not just about the case. It was also about proving that appearances could be deceiving. "Yes, Your Honor," Alex replied politely, his voice steady despite the tension. "I have prepared my arguments and have the necessary references. I am confident in presenting my case." His words were simple, but there was a calm authority in them that made a few heads in the courtroom turn slightly in surprise. The judge leaned back in his chair, clearly amused but also slightly intrigued. He had dealt with lawyers who stumbled under pressure, who lost track of arguments, and who relied too heavily on scripts. He had never seen someone so young stand with such confidence, yet he dismissed it as mere bravado. "Well, let's see what you've got then," the judge said, tapping his gavel lightly. "But don't waste my time. The law can be complicated, and I have a feeling this will go over your head." Alex nodded once and opened his folder. He had rehearsed his introduction countless times, but he allowed himself a brief moment to breathe and observe the courtroom. There were a few people whispering, some shaking their heads, and a couple of faces showing genuine curiosity. The atmosphere was tense, but Alex felt a strange clarity. He had been trained for moments like this, even if no one knew it. He began to speak clearly and deliberately. "Your Honor, I am here today representing myself in a claim regarding the contract dispute with the local business. The main issue, as I understand it, is whether the terms of the agreement were fulfilled by both parties. I will provide evidence, cite relevant precedents, and present my arguments logically and respectfully." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Impressive words, young man, but words are easy. Can you back them up with substance?" Alex nodded again and began outlining the timeline of events. He spoke slowly, making sure each point was clear. He referenced documents, invoices, and even prior case decisions that supported his position. The courtroom listened, some in disbelief, others whispering to each other, clearly impressed by how well prepared he was. As he spoke, flashbacks of his preparation ran through his mind. From a very young age, Alex had been immersed in the world of law. His grandfather, a retired judge, had noticed his sharp mind and curiosity, and had begun teaching him legal principles when he was only 10. He had learned to read case laws, understand contracts, and even practice courtroom etiquette. It had been rigorous, sometimes overwhelming, but Alex loved it. Law fascinated him. The way logic, strategy, and words could be used to protect people and seek justice. But to the outside world, Alex looked like any other teenager. He liked video games, enjoyed hanging out with friends, and sometimes struggled with math homework just like his classmates. Nobody could have guessed that beneath his youthful appearance was a mind trained to navigate the complexities of the legal system. Returning to the present, Alex continued his argument. He methodically addressed the opposing parties' points, pointing out inconsistencies in their claims and weaknesses in their evidence. Each time the judge attempted to interrupt or dismiss a point, Alex responded calmly, citing the law and previous court decisions. The room started to shift its perception of him. Whispers turned into quiet admiration. Even the opposing attorney, a seasoned professional, paused for a moment, clearly reconsidering their strategy. The judge, meanwhile, was experiencing a mix of emotions. At first, he had been entertained, confident that he could easily redirect or embarrass the teenager. But now he felt a subtle unease. This boy, this seemingly ordinary teenager, was holding his attention, commanding respect and demonstrating knowledge that few adult lawyers possessed. Every interruption he made was met with a poised and well-reasoned response. Despite the rising tension, Alex never lost his composure. He spoke politely, maintaining eye contact and showing respect for the court, the judge, and even the opposing side. He wasn't trying to win by intimidation or theatrics. He was relying on preparation, logic, and clarity. By the time he finished his opening argument, there was a noticeable change in the room. People who had initially doubted him were now impressed. Some of the courtroom staff exchanged quiet remarks about how unusual it was to see someone so young and so skilled. Even the judge, though trying to mask it, looked thoughtful and a little wary. Alex closed his folder gently and said, "That concludes my opening argument. Your Honor, I am ready to present my evidence and respond to any questions or challenges." The courtroom was silent for a brief moment, a silence heavy with surprise and curiosity. Then the judge cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said slowly. "Let's proceed. But don't think for a second that I am convinced by age alone. You may know the law, but let's see how you handle the real challenges." Alex nodded once more. Inside, he felt a small surge of satisfaction. The real test was just beginning, and he was ready. He knew that the judge's skepticism would continue, and the courtroom would scrutinize every word. But he also knew something else. This was his chance to show that talent and preparation mattered more than appearances or assumptions. The rest of the courtroom watched closely as Alex prepared to move on to the evidence phase. Papers were organized, exhibits ready, and his arguments rehearsed in his mind one last time. There was a quiet energy in the room now, a mix of tension and curiosity. Everyone sensed that something unusual was happening, though no one yet realized how extraordinary it truly was. As the judge glanced over at him again, Alex could see the flicker of doubt or perhaps respect cross his face. For the first time that morning, the judge realized he might have underestimated this teenager. But neither of them knew just how far this young prodigy would go today, or the impression he would leave on everyone in that courtroom. And so, the case moved forward, not just as a legal dispute, but as the beginning of a story about perception, talent, and the surprising ways wisdom can appear in the most unexpected forms. Alex was ready to face the challenge, fully aware that this courtroom was about to witness something it had rarely seen. A teenager, not just arguing a case, but mastering it. As the courtroom settled back into silence, Alex felt a quiet confidence. The opening had gone better than he expected. The judge's initial teasing had only fueled his focus. He knew the real challenge was ahead, presenting the evidence and proving his case convincingly. He carefully placed his folder on the table and opened it to the first exhibit. He began with a calm, steady voice. "Your Honor, I would like to present the signed agreement between myself and the business owner. It clearly outlines the responsibilities of both parties and the expected outcomes. The document specifies deadlines, payments, and conditions for service. I will show that the other party failed to meet the terms." Alex carefully laid out the documents, pointing to each clause as he explained it. He cited the specific sections with confidence, referencing standard contract law principles that applied. The courtroom listened intently, and a few spectators leaned forward, their curiosity growing. The opposing attorney frowned. They had assumed that a teenager would make simple mistakes or lose track of legal procedures, but Alex was precise. He answered questions before they were fully asked and referenced previous cases that perfectly supported his position. Even seasoned lawyers in the room couldn't help but glance at him with surprise. The judge, who had started the day with a smirk, now leaned forward slightly. "You are very articulate," he said cautiously. "But knowledge of clauses alone does not prove your point. You must show that the breach caused a real loss or damage." Alex nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I will demonstrate that clearly." He then introduced a timeline of events. Using a simple chart he had prepared, he showed how the business failed to deliver on its promises. Each delay was documented with dates, emails, and receipts. The way he explained it was simple to follow, yet very thorough. Even those unfamiliar with legal terms could understand the problem. He noticed the judge taking notes. The judge had been skeptical, expecting confusion or hesitation, but Alex's clarity left no room for doubt. The teenager wasn't just repeating what he had memorized. He understood it. Every word was meaningful, every point precise. As Alex continued, he anticipated the objections the opposing attorney would raise. When the attorney attempted to argue that the deadlines were not clearly stated, Alex countered smoothly. "Your Honor, the agreement specifies exact dates and conditions. The other party confirmed these in writing multiple times, as shown in the email submitted." He handed copies to the court clerk, who distributed them efficiently. The judge glanced through the emails quickly. They were clear, undeniable evidence. He looked up at Alex, now showing a flicker of something new, respect mixed with disbelief. The courtroom audience began murmuring again, sensing the shift. This was no ordinary case presentation and no ordinary teenager. Alex then moved to the most critical point of his argument, the impact of the breach. "Your Honor, the failure to deliver on these terms caused financial losses and inconvenience. For example, I had to pay extra fees to another service provider to meet my obligations. This cost could have been avoided if the terms of the agreement were honored." He explained each example calmly, using simple words and clear reasoning. He avoided legal jargon that could confuse the audience. Everyone could understand the logic and the fairness of his argument. The judge nodded slightly, acknowledging the clarity and relevance of what Alex presented. The opposing attorney attempted another objection, trying to discredit Alex's reasoning. But Alex was ready. He had anticipated every possible counterpoint. "Your Honor," he said politely, "I understand the objection. However, the facts and documents presented clearly show that the responsibility lies with the other party. This is supported by the precedent of a previous case, in which similar circumstances led to the same conclusion." The courtroom was quiet. No one interrupted. Alex's voice was steady, his tone confident but polite. The judge was silent, studying Alex carefully. It was as if he were realizing for the first time that this teenager was not just knowledgeable, but exceptionally skilled. After presenting all the evidence, Alex paused. He had planned every step carefully, but he remained flexible. He could see the judge leaning forward, curious to see what would happen next. The judge had expected a simple, possibly clumsy presentation, but Alex's organization and understanding had turned the table completely. There was a short break in the proceedings, and the judge whispered to his clerk. Alex couldn't hear the words, but he noticed the judge's expression had changed. The earlier smirk was gone. Instead, there was a seriousness that he hadn't seen before. For the first time, the judge seemed to consider Alex as an equal, at least in this moment. During the break, Alex reflected on how far he had come. He remembered long nights studying law, practicing arguments with his grandfather, and writing mock cases. All of it had led to this moment, and he realized that preparation was more powerful than any advantage someone might have in the courtroom. The judge's teasing had been challenging, but it had also given him motivation to perform his best. The courtroom reconvened, and the opposing attorney tried to regain control, but it was clear the audience's attention had shifted. Whispers spread about the teenager's knowledge and poise. People were impressed by his ability to present complex legal arguments in a way that was easy to understand. Some even shared quiet looks of admiration, shaking their heads at how calm and capable he seemed. Alex now addressed the potential damages more carefully. "In addition to financial loss, Your Honor, there were also delays in the services I needed. These delays affected other obligations and caused unnecessary stress. The responsibility of the agreement was not only a matter of money, but also of fairness and reliability. The law supports the idea that agreements must be honored in both letter and spirit." He could see the judge scribbling notes. The previous mockery and sarcasm had faded. Now there was something else, awareness that this young person might be exceptional. Alex kept his tone polite, never gloating, knowing that humility and confidence together were more convincing than arrogance. As Alex spoke, his mind briefly flashed to his grandfather's advice. "Always remember, Alex, the law is about clarity, logic, and respect. Confidence alone is not enough. Listen carefully, speak clearly, and never let emotion override reason. He smiled slightly, grateful for the guidance. Every word he spoke now reflected that wisdom. The judge finally interjected, not to mock, but to challenge. You have shown knowledge, young man, but can you handle objections on the spot? It's easy to read from papers. The real test is responding under pressure. Alex met the judge's gaze calmly. Your Honor, I am prepared to respond. I understand that challenges are part of the process, and I am ready to address any objections based on facts and the law. The courtroom leaned in, sensing a turning point. Alex was not just reciting prepared statements. He was thinking, analyzing, and responding intelligently. Each answer he gave was clear, concise, and grounded in evidence. The opposing attorney began to look uncertain, and even a few court staff glanced at each other, impressed. By the time this phase of the case ended, the mood in the courtroom had shifted completely. The audience, initially skeptical or even amused by the idea of a teenager representing himself, now watched with fascination and respect. They whispered about his skill and maturity, amazed at how well he could present and defend a case. The judge, sitting in his chair, finally leaned back and regarded Alex with a mix of surprise and careful consideration. He had underestimated him at the start of the day, assuming he would be naive or clumsy. Now he realized that this teenager had a depth of understanding far beyond his years. Alex closed his folder carefully, acknowledging the attention without arrogance. He knew that the next steps would involve more challenges, more objections, and possibly even attempts to trip him up. But he was ready. His preparation, experience, and calm demeanor had carried him this far, and he had no doubt it would continue to serve him well. As the courtroom paused for the next phase, everyone present, judges, attorneys, and spectators alike, felt that they were witnessing something unusual, something memorable. This was not just a minor civil case anymore. It had become a demonstration of talent, preparation, and the surprising abilities that could be found in someone who looked, at first glance, like an ordinary teenager. And as Alex prepared for the next round, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had handled the initial challenge, earned the courtroom's attention, and most importantly, begun to prove that wisdom, skill, and confidence were not determined by age. Today was only the beginning, but it was already clear that this teenager would leave a lasting impression on everyone in the room. The courtroom had grown unusually quiet. The earlier whispers and curiosity had settled into a tense anticipation. Everyone could sense that this case was no longer ordinary. Alex, the teenager who had calmly presented his evidence and addressed objections, was now about to face the real test, the unpredictable challenges that came with live courtroom arguments. The judge, who had initially treated him with amusement, was now carefully watching every movement and listening to every word. Alex could feel the weight of the moment, but he remained steady. He knew the next stage would be more intense. The opposing attorney, a seasoned professional with years of experience, had clearly realized that underestimating Alex was a mistake. They were trying to regain control, asking questions designed to catch him off guard, to expose any hesitation or lack of understanding. Mr. Alex, the opposing attorney began, a hint of doubt in their voice. You have presented a timeline and documents, but can you prove that the damages you claim are directly caused by the other party's actions? There are other factors that could have contributed. How do you account for them? Alex looked directly at them, calm and composed. Your Honor, the evidence I have presented clearly shows a chain of events directly linked to the breach of the agreement. The emails, receipts, and communication logs establish that the delays and failures were caused solely by the other party. Other potential factors are either irrelevant or addressed within the documentation provided. This is consistent with the principles established in prior cases, where causation and responsibility were determined using similar evidence. The courtroom fell silent. The clarity and confidence in his voice made the argument hard to dispute. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed by the teenager's ability to respond under pressure. He had expected at least some hesitation, some misstep, but Alex's answer was precise, logical, and calm. The opposing attorney frowned, trying to think of another angle. They asked, "How do you justify the additional costs you incurred? Couldn't they be considered voluntary expenses rather than damages?" Alex nodded politely, showing that he had anticipated this objection. Your Honor, the additional costs were necessary to fulfill obligations that arose from the agreement. They were not voluntary but compelled by the other party's failure to meet their responsibilities. The law considers such expenses as compensable damages when they are directly linked to a breach. I have provided documentation of the payments and the reasons they were required. Some members of the audience whispered to each other. The way Alex explained complex legal principles in simple, understandable terms was remarkable. It wasn't just his knowledge that impressed them. It was the way he communicated it. People could understand his points, and even those without a legal background could follow his reasoning. The judge, sitting in his elevated chair, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He had initially underestimated Alex, assuming he would be nervous or inexperienced. But now, after hearing his arguments and seeing how he handled objections, the judge realized he might have misjudged this teenager entirely. He leaned forward slightly, curious to see how Alex would handle the next challenge. "Very well, young man," the judge said carefully. "You have presented evidence and addressed initial objections. But the law is not always straightforward. I want to see how you respond to hypothetical scenarios. Suppose another party, unrelated to this agreement, caused similar delays. How would you separate those factors from the responsibility of the party in question?" Alex took a moment to consider the question. He did not rush his answer, knowing that thoughtfulness mattered as much as knowledge. "Your Honor, in such a case, I would examine the evidence carefully to establish causation. Only those delays directly linked to the party in question would be considered a breach. Any unrelated factors would be excluded from the calculation of damages. This approach ensures fairness and consistency with established legal principles. I would rely on communication records, timelines, and documentation to differentiate between causes and determine responsibility accurately." The judge leaned back, clearly impressed. He had seen many attorneys struggle with hypotheticals, yet Alex responded with clarity and precision. There was no hesitation, no guesswork, only well-reasoned explanation. Even the opposing attorney looked slightly taken aback, realizing that this teenager was not only prepared, but deeply knowledgeable. As the case progressed, Alex anticipated further challenges. The opposing attorney tried to introduce new evidence that might complicate the situation. They handed over documents and questioned Alex about inconsistencies, but he had reviewed every possible document before coming to court. He responded confidently, pointing out the relevant details and explaining why some evidence was irrelevant or misleading. Throughout it all, Alex's demeanor never faltered. He maintained eye contact, spoke politely, and showed respect for the court and the judge. He did not react with frustration or defensiveness, even when the opposing attorney tried to provoke him. This calmness, combined with his knowledge, began to shift the mood in the courtroom. People who had doubted him now watched with admiration. At one point, the judge interjected again, testing him further. "You have shown great understanding of the law and the case, but can you handle cross-examination of witnesses?" "Many adults find this challenging." Alex nodded. "I am prepared, Your Honor." A witness was called, a representative from the opposing business. The attorney attempted to guide the witness in a way that would contradict Alex's points. But Alex asked clear, direct questions, carefully leading the witness to clarify facts without being aggressive or manipulative. Each response highlighted the truth and supported his case. The courtroom could see that Alex was not only knowledgeable, but also strategic and fair. The judge watched closely, now visibly unsettled. He had expected at least some mistakes or gaps, but Alex continued to answer every challenge with precision and composure. He seemed to anticipate objections before they were raised, always ready with supporting evidence. Outside the courtroom, spectators whispered about the teenager's skill. "Can you believe it? He's only 17 and he's handling this like a seasoned lawyer." "Yeah," another whispered. "He's calm, clear, and he knows the law inside out." "I've never seen anything like it." Inside, Alex remained focused. He ignored the whispers, the glances, and the occasional skeptical stare. His mind was on the case, analyzing every argument, every document, and every point of law. He understood that confidence came from preparation, not bravado. As the session continued, Alex reached a critical moment. He noticed a small but important inconsistency in the opposing attorney's argument, a detail that could weaken their entire position. Calmly, he highlighted it to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to point out that the evidence presented by the opposing side contains a discrepancy regarding dates and responsibilities. The timeline they provided does not match the signed agreement and the documented communication. This discrepancy supports my argument that the breach was caused by their failure to meet obligations, not by external factors. The courtroom was silent again. The judge examined the documents closely. He realized that Alex had identified a critical point that even some adult lawyers might have overlooked. The opposing attorney looked frustrated, knowing that this observation could shift the case further in Alex's favor. The audience began to sense that the case had changed. What started as a simple civil dispute had turned into a demonstration of extraordinary talent. A teenager, underestimated by everyone, was now in control of the courtroom's attention. His calm logic, preparation, and fairness made it impossible to dismiss him. By the end of the session, the judge had no choice but to acknowledge Alex's skill, even if silently. His previous skepticism had given way to a quiet respect, though he would not admit it openly yet. Alex had successfully handled objections, presented evidence, and questioned witnesses with a clarity that few expected. As the court adjourned for a short break, people whispered excitedly about the teenager's performance. Even the judge, who remained reserved, looked thoughtful and reflective. He had underestimated Alex at the start of the day, assuming he was inexperienced and unprepared. Now he realized he was witnessing something rare, a young mind capable of reasoning, analyzing and presenting law with skill and maturity beyond his years. Alex stepped back slightly, allowing the courtroom to settle. He knew that this was just one part of the challenge. The next stage would likely involve more complex arguments and perhaps direct scrutiny of his credentials. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He had proven that knowledge, preparation, and composure could overcome assumptions and bias. And as the courtroom awaited the next phase, it was clear to everyone present that this teenager was not ordinary. He had not only met the challenge but exceeded expectations, leaving a lasting impression on the judge, the opposing attorney, and the audience alike. This was a turning point. The moment when everyone realized that appearances could be deceiving, and that talent, skill, and determination were what truly mattered. The courtroom was tense, but a new energy had taken over. Everyone who had been skeptical about the teenager now watched with astonishment. Alex had managed objections, questioned witnesses, and presented evidence flawlessly. The judge, who had started the day with a smirk and sarcastic remarks, now observed Alex with a mixture of disbelief and cautious respect. Alex could sense the shift in the room. What had begun as a minor civil dispute had turned into something much bigger. The judge's teasing no longer held power, and the courtroom audience was captivated. Alex remained calm, polite, and professional. He knew the next moments would be decisive. The opposing attorney, sensing they had lost momentum, attempted a final challenge. "Mr. Alex," they said, "you have presented your case well, but no one can truly understand the law by age alone. Can you explain how you acquired this knowledge? Are you simply repeating what you have read, or do you have actual legal experience?" Alex paused for a brief moment, choosing his words carefully. He knew this was the perfect moment to reveal what few had expected. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, "I have studied the law extensively under the guidance of my grandfather, a retired judge. I have practiced mock cases, researched precedents, and trained in courtroom procedures from a very young age. But more importantly, I am a licensed attorney. I passed the bar exam at 16 and have been practicing under supervision since then." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and gasps. Some people stared in disbelief, while others whispered excitedly. The judge, who had been taking notes, froze. His hand hovered over the gavel, unsure of what to do next. He had expected a bright teenager, perhaps unusually knowledgeable for his age, but he had never anticipated this. A licensed attorney in the courtroom disguised as a teenager was something he had never encountered. The opposing attorney's mouth opened, but no words came out immediately. They looked shocked, flustered, and suddenly unsure of how to proceed. The courtroom staff whispered among themselves, and some spectators even gasped audibly. The idea that someone so young had not only studied law but was already licensed and experienced stunned everyone. The judge cleared his throat and finally spoke, his tone cautious but still trying to maintain authority. You are a licensed attorney? At 17? Alex nodded politely. Yes, Your Honor. I understand this is unusual, but it is the truth. I wanted to represent myself today to demonstrate that age and appearance do not determine one's capability to understand and practice the law. There was a brief silence as everyone processed this revelation. Even the opposing attorney, now regaining composure, had to rethink their strategy. They realized that the teenager they had underestimated was not only competent, but extraordinary. The judge, still trying to maintain control of the courtroom, finally leaned forward slightly. I must admit I did not anticipate this. Your arguments, your understanding of the evidence, your responses to objections, all of it was impressive. You have demonstrated skill far beyond your years. Alex remained humble, though he allowed a small, confident smile. Thank you, Your Honor. I am here to present the facts and ensure that justice is served regardless of my age. Some spectators began clapping quietly, a sign of admiration and respect. The courtroom had shifted from a place of doubt and judgment to one of awe and curiosity. Everyone was now fully aware that Alex was not just a clever teenager, but a talented and capable professional. The judge paused, reflecting on the lesson he had just received. He had been quick to judge based on appearances, assuming that a teenager could not handle the complexities of a legal case. But Alex had proven him wrong in every way. This is remarkable, the judge admitted. You have shown that knowledge, preparation, and composure matter more than age. I must apologize for my earlier remarks. They were inappropriate and unfair. Alex nodded. I appreciate your acknowledgement, Your Honor. I hope this serves as a reminder that judging someone by their age or appearance can often lead to mistakes. The opposing attorney, now more composed, spoke up. While I am surprised, I must recognize the skill displayed here today. Your work is thorough and well-reasoned. I will adjust my approach accordingly. Alex responded with courtesy, maintaining the respectful tone he had shown throughout the trial. He knew that professionalism was as important as knowledge, especially in a courtroom filled with experienced adults. The rest of the session continued with Alex providing further clarification on his points. Every question from the judge or opposing attorney was met with thoughtful, precise answers. The courtroom was no longer tense with skepticism. It was engaged, watching the teenager handle complex legal matters with grace and competence. As the case progressed, Alex also demonstrated his strategic thinking. He anticipated potential objections and addressed them proactively. He showed how small details in contracts and communications could have significant implications, explaining them in clear, understandable terms. This combination of legal expertise and communication skill impressed everyone present. Outside the courtroom, whispers spread quickly. People shared stories about the teenager attorney who had outsmarted a judge's expectations. Social media posts began circulating, praising Alex's intelligence, poise, and professionalism. He had become a symbol of what dedication, preparation, and talent could achieve, regardless of age. Inside the courtroom, the judge was no longer skeptical. He had learned a valuable lesson about humility and perception. I must say, he told Alex quietly, you have exceeded every expectation. You have shown not only knowledge but wisdom in handling yourself in the case. It is rare to see such skill at any age, let alone 17. Alex smiled politely. Thank you, Your Honor. I hope my actions here today encourage others to focus on their abilities and preparation, rather than letting external judgments limit their potential. The session concluded with Alex having clearly established his case, his abilities, and his professionalism. The judge called for a short recess, allowing everyone to absorb the revelation. People in the courtroom exchanged looks of amazement, some shaking their heads in disbelief. No one could deny what they had just witnessed. Even the opposing attorney, who had entered the courtroom confident in their experience, now approached Alex with a mixture of respect and curiosity. I underestimated you, they admitted quietly. You've handled this far better than most attorneys with decades of experience. I look forward to seeing the final outcome. Alex nodded graciously. He had anticipated that some might be surprised or even intimidated, but he focused on maintaining respect and professionalism. He knew that humility was as important as competence, especially when challenging expectations and breaking stereotypes. The courtroom staff and spectators were buzzing with excitement. Some whispered about the teenager's future, wondering what he might accomplish next. Others were simply impressed by the calm, respectful, and intelligent way Alex had handled himself. It was clear that this was not an ordinary case, and Alex was not an ordinary teenager. As the day drew to a close, the judge reflected privately on the events. He realized that he had been too quick to judge based on appearances, assuming that a young face meant limited ability. Alex had proven that skill, knowledge, and preparation were far more important than age. He had not only handled the case expertly, but had also taught the courtroom an important lesson in humility and respect. Alex, meanwhile, packed his documents carefully. He felt satisfied not just because of the legal success he had achieved so far, but because he had challenged perceptions and shown that capability was not limited by age. He knew the next steps would continue to test him, but he was ready for whatever came next. As people began to leave the courtroom, conversations buzzed with admiration and surprise. Teachers, students, attorneys, and spectators all shared their thoughts about the teenager who had turned expectations upside down. Alex had become more than a participant in a case. He had become a symbol of determination, skill, and the power of preparation. The judge, sitting alone for a moment, reflected on the events of the day. He realized that he had been reminded of a valuable lesson. Never underestimate someone based on appearance alone. Knowledge and talent could emerge in the most unexpected forms, and respect must be earned, not assumed. Alex left the courtroom calmly, aware of the attention he was receiving but focused on the future. He had shown that preparation, composure, and skill could overcome doubt and skepticism. And while today was extraordinary, he knew that it was just the beginning of a journey that would continue to challenge perceptions, inspire others, and demonstrate the power of dedication and intelligence. The courtroom was buzzing with energy after the revelation of Alex's identity. Everyone present, attorneys, staff, and spectators, was still processing the fact that a teenager had not only represented himself, but was also a licensed attorney. The tension from earlier had shifted into awe, respect, and excitement. Alex had handled the case with professionalism and skill, and now the final moments would determine the lasting impression he would leave on everyone. The judge called the courtroom to order. He adjusted his robe and looked directly at Alex, a mixture of seriousness and admiration in his eyes. "Alex," he said, "today has been an eye-opening experience for everyone here. I admit I underestimated you. Your preparation, understanding, and calmness under pressure have proven beyond doubt that age is not a measure of ability." Alex nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate your acknowledgement. My goal was not only to represent my case, but also to demonstrate that dedication and preparation can achieve results, regardless of how someone may appear." The courtroom murmured in agreement. Some spectators whispered to each other about how rare it was to see such talent at a young age. The opposing attorney, who had initially been confident and even dismissive, now nodded in respect. "Your work today was impressive," they said quietly to Alex. "I have learned a lot from observing your approach." Alex smiled politely. "I'm glad the case could be constructive for everyone involved." "Thank you." The judge then addressed the specifics of the case. He reviewed the evidence, the arguments, and the logical clarity Alex had maintained throughout the day. After considering the documents, testimony, and the thoroughness of the arguments presented, he said, "It is clear that the responsibilities outlined in the agreement were not fully met by the other party. Alex's points are well supported and logical. The judgment will reflect that." The courtroom reacted with soft murmurs and nods. The judge continued, "This case has been unusual in more ways than one. It has challenged our expectations and reminded us that skill, knowledge, and fairness matter far more than assumptions based on age or appearance." Alex felt a quiet satisfaction. He had prepared for this day meticulously, studying every aspect of the case, and his efforts had paid off. But beyond winning the case, he felt a deeper sense of accomplishment. He had changed perceptions, taught a lesson in humility, and shown that anyone with dedication and preparation could achieve extraordinary results. After the judge announced the preliminary judgment, the courtroom took a short recess. Spectators approached Alex, offering congratulations and expressing their admiration. Many were curious about his story, about how a teenager could have such